Welcome back, all my 40K fanatics out there. I'm DJ here with Tim's Nation to bring another video for my cronies. Today we had the data sheets and point updates and everything that came out on Games Workshop's website. So I wanted to take some time and talk about all of what we've seen, the different changes, how they affect us, and how things just look in general from a Necrons perspective. From a player who's played Necrons for a good couple of years now, some of the things that I see and some of the things that I see that affect our units into this. So look forward to starting the conversation on this stuff and seeing what other people have kind of tapped into. I have my direction that I'm looking at for stuff, but there is a lot of very interesting and cool builds that are going to start popping up for Necrons here real soon. Very happy to hear that the leaks that myself, and many others had seen across the internet, it did look kind of like it wasn't going to happen. But because Lane and I were testing different lists and different stuff, with the stuff he was testing, I wanted to see how much, if these things were true, the dial back would have been on Necrons in general. How much durability would we actually have lost, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Good thing was that was all fictitious because none of that came out today. And hopefully it isn't going to be a surprise. Oops, we forgot this and dropped on us later on. But it looks like we came out of this thing pretty good. And it's not too vicious. I haven't said it already, and I just don't want to forget. Guys, please, if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do, and turn on the bell for notifications to get notified on all the content that we make here on the channel. So I'm going to be getting ready to record another video here real soon, actually right after this one, talking about one of the interesting builds that I was working on pre-point drop and stuff like that, and just kind of put my research out there of how far I got with a Xeris warrior build, and see if I really want to start a conversation in the community, seeing what direction we can take a Xeris all warrior build, what's the right numbers, et cetera, because that is kind of, in one way, a style that we've never really been able to play. In the last, there was Steel Tide with the Silent King in the early edition with the Codex. But that one did rely on a 500 point model in there. And granted, we're going to talk about him. He dropped in points. Now it's with Xeris, and Xeris dropped in points, which means we have significantly less points needed to dedicate to big, bulky guy to make the army run. Now we can play kind of an undead horde, and I'm excited to give that a try. It's not the exact direction I'm going right now, but man, I can't say that I don't see this as being really powerful, and could potentially be more powerful than what I'm trying to make work. But enough of that. Let's talk about the changes that we saw today. So some of the big things before get into the points. We've seen devastating wounds change. They don't spill over anymore, which means that when a Wraith cannon from a Wraith Knight, hits and does devastating wounds to your squad of warriors, and they roll, they put the 6 down for their fate dice for the wound roll, making it devastating wounds, and then use fate dice, roll 2 dice. They do 7 mortal wounds. Well, that would be 7 dead warriors or 7 feel no pains, depending on your build, for how many you would lose. Now, that one model just takes 7 damage. That can no armor save or invuln. So it's going to tone down how bad some of those weapons that Eldar were packing could just tear through armies, tear through units, where the Wraith Cannon legitimately could destroy anything in the game. Infantry to tanks, it just could destroy anything. And half the time, you didn't even need to roll the dice. You had fate dice. And yes, now they changed it to how fate dice worked, but I mean, the Wraith Cannon was a scary thing to go up against. I remember how much I hated every time I went against it. I'm like, well, what do I want to give you to destroy, and hope that you destroy that and not this? And it's a rough matchup. So that's a big change. It's going to change the overall top of the meta right there. They changed the way stratagems get reduced and the point cost changes. You now are Overlord, who can zero out a stratagem can only zero out battle tactic stratagems. That's not the reanimate stratagem. So you have, and I think it's reroll wounds that you could use. And I'm assuming yes, because character's obviously leading the unit. You could zero out the rerolled failed wounds, and you can zero out. Oh, I can't remember the other one on hand, but there's those two stratagems that you can zero out. What was it? Oh, the assault. Give your unit assault, and you can, in your movement phase, you can advance and then still shoot weapons. So those are the two strats you can zero out. Now, there's probably a couple generic ones that I'm forgetting right now, and as I'm thinking about it, I completely spaced out and forgot to grab those ones. But yes, there's probably a couple generic ones that would function with this, but it's the one that I know that a lot of us loved using on was the 0 CP on a reanimate strat, especially because when going up against Imperium, Vex off of a Calidus Assassin, Calidus being able to make one stratagem cost 1 CP more per for the entire rest of the game after that first use. They're just sitting there waiting for the first time you're going to pop that reanimation. And then as soon as they do, bam, it's vexed. And you can no longer get it for 1 CP. So having the Overlord allowed us to drop it to 0 CP. So that was one way around it. Yes, I know there were some questions into that as well too, but I'm going to speak just my entire meta. You drop that thing to 0 CP. That was the way around it. But it was only that one time, that one strat in that usage. So now that's not as valuable. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute, because the reason I'm talking about that actually matters when we start talking about some of the points. But moving on with some of the major overhauling changes. The Overwatch strat now is excluded to some units, such as like Titanic units and things like that. So Imperial Knights can't Overwatch really. And then sadly, if you look at when they talk about runes, at first I didn't notice it. I was like, okay, I don't understand why this is here. Are you adding something here for aircraft, blah, blah, blah. Towering got taken out of the excluding runes. Now it's only aircrafts that exclude ruins and use true line of sight, which means Imperial Knights can't shoot across the board anymore. That's Imperial Knights got hit hard, this one. Really bad for that. I feel for them a little bit there, because that's a difficult army, I feel, to get right, because it's such few models that it's really a tough one. I think last edition they did it right with Chaos, where Chaos almost kind of like leveled up by performing different abilities. And in my opinion, I almost feel like Imperial Knights need to kind of play that way, where they're almost gaining experience across the battlefield doing specific tasks, which they've had with Honor. But then it's just like, oh, if you do this, one thing happens. And I think having an experience point tree more of set up on the data cards, where the data cards can be used to monitor this on there. I mean, Games Workshop is putting all this stuff out there. I think that's a good direction that Imperial Knights could go, hopefully. Aside from that, I mean, there was one other little change with, the leadership. Leadership now for the insane bravery stratagem can only be used before you roll the dice. So now before it was roll the dice, fail it, okay, I'll spend the command point. Now you have to determine, do you want to spend that command point now and not have to worry about the leadership, or are you going to risk it for the biscuit and throw some dice? And that's going to be interesting, because there's a lot of units that don't have surprisingly don't have good leadership. One that surprises me is like canoptic units. Canoptic units are autonomous robots. So it really surprises me that they would give them such a bad leadership at that leadership 8. Now, granted, it doesn't affect that much with things like scarabs, because scarabs are already objective control 0. There's not exactly a bunch of stratagems we're going to be throwing on them. So that then leads me over to, what is it? The actual, like, the point changes and stuff like that. And I think some of the dynamics of what we're going to start using, because you still want to be able to hit units with stratagems, especially keeping them in on points. And for that, the first thing I'm going to go to is we may not need overlords anymore. So overlords from the previous cost are 85 points versus a lord that is 65. What the overlord is giving us is that free command point reduction. Okay, cool, but that's only on these very specific stratagems. He gives you a resurrection orb. So does a lord. He's a tougher model. He's tougher. He's got it. He's more tanky. How much more tanky do we need with that? I mean, I feel like if our Necron squads, warriors or Lich Guard, get busted down to the Lord and Overlord, the Overlords, I mean, yeah, they're a little bit better, but they die just the same. Yes, an Overlord reduces damage by 1, but do we need that? I mean, when we're talking about a lot of our characters that we end up bringing up that price real quick with Technomancers and stuff like that, that's a place I think that we're going to start seeing a lot more cuts. Is going to be the Overlord to the Lord. Also, what does the Lord bring to the table? Back to the battle shock thing, back to the stratagem thing, and how you have to decide if you're going to spend the command point before you take the battle shock test. And actually, I'm sorry, I was thinking in my head that stratagem is used anytime. I think that stratagem can only be used during the command phase when you test battle shock. But needless to say, the Lord gives you the ability to ignore the battle shock results when using stratagems. I do not want to be in a position where my Lich Guard get hit and I can't spend the 1 command point strat to resurrect and trigger my reanimator nearby to be able to resurrect more and keep them running up the field. I'm still a big advocate of the sword and board Lich Guard, and I think with the poison increase to them, that's going to be what we're still going to see is like the 1 sword and board Lich Guard, fully tooled out Death Star style, running up the middle, especially since the leaks were wrong about the reanimator. You can tuck it in a corner, still hide it, and it's a 12-inch beacon, reanimate around it. So that's still a huge piece of tech that we have. Talking about the reanimator, he did go up in points. He went up 10 points from 95 to 105. And the Lich Guard as well. The Lich Guard were the big hit. So as I just mentioned, I said we're going to be seeing probably just 1 squad sword and board Lich Guard because of the invuln and that extra toughness and reduction of devastating wounds, especially too. The Lich Guard went up in points quite a bit, roughly 4 points per model, from 19 points per model to 23 points per model, making it that you're spending 115 for the 5-man and 230 for the 10-man. Yeah, I know, easy math. Sorry, it's been a long day. Going through a lot of numbers, making a lot of roster changes. I bet a lot of people can also understand where that's coming from because seeing all these points and everything change, and once you update if you make rosters on the app, once you update that app and you look at it and go, oh man, I'm over 100 and some points, and you're like, oh, what can I do? What can I change? I was pleasantly happy to see that my Grey Knights list dropped 280 points. That's fun. Necrons, not so much. And here's some of the reasons why. One, like I was saying, was the Lich Guard. Going up to 230 for a 10-man, I think is going to start to reduce the amount of Lich Guard that we see for 2 reasons. One, they went up to 230 points, and Necron Warriors dropped 1 point per model, meaning that a 10-man squad is going to be 110, where a 20 is only going to cost you 220. So it's now 10 points cheaper for 20 warriors or 20 wound unit bodies versus 20 wound unit Lich Guard. I'll argue, obviously, more defensive and stronger and more powerful unit for that 10 extra points, but 20 warriors, 20 individual bodies. They soak up all the multi-damage and the Feel No Pains and Illuminator Xeris, which is going to be a big part of this. And that's kind of what I'm getting ready to set up here because I want to talk about Illuminator Xeris and where I got to with building a Xeris list. Xeris dropped from 220 points to 185 points. 30, what is that? 20, 35 points he dropped. I have no idea why. anybody who has run Xeris this edition at all can probably agree he doesn't die. The guy is an 8. He's toughness 8. So he's bulky enough to take hits from like errant fire and things like that. He's a lone operative as long as he's near another Necron unit. He's got a 2-up, 4-up with a 4-up feel no pain. He reanimates just like everything else. So if he's near the reanimator, he's getting 2d3 back. And then when he dies the first time, he's infantry and a character. 1 CP, he stands back up. Just stands back up with D3 wounds. And your opponent prays they didn't take him out in the assault phase. Because then it goes to your turn, and then you heal another D3 because reanimation protocols. He just does not die. And he comes with one of the biggest buffs that we have in the army, giving all of our battle line units a boosted AP of AP1 and Armor of Contempt. Reduce all weapon AP for incoming attacks by 1 as an aura. And then whenever he pops a model in combat, he extends the range of that aura, and they don't need to be wholly within, just within. So, and from what it reads and the way it seems, it doesn't just stop at the going from 6 inches to 3 inches. If you take another model out in another turn in the assault phase, it goes another 3 inches. Now, mind you, it can only do that one time. The way it's worded, it can only do that one time per turn because it checks at the end of the turn and says, did you kill a model? If yes, plus 3 inches. So it doesn't matter if he kills 4 models or 3 models. He doesn't even need to kill a squad. He just needs to kill one dude out of a unit. That's it. So Xeris and Warriors are going to be a huge build. And that's, but we'll get over to that. What are some of the other things that got points that were craziness? Canoptic Doomstalkers went up to 135. I think the biggest reason they went up to 135 is to try to not have everybody just completely start cramming them into their armies. Now that the Doomsday arc, and I didn't have this down here, went up and over 200 points. I believe it's at 210. So the Doomsday arc going up and taking the hit to the devastating wounds, it doesn't make it that bad still, because it is a flat 4 damage weapon, and it's blast, and the devastating wound effect is nice. Plus, it would be hitting on 2s off of our Sovereign Cornell, or hitting off on 3s as it is, being heavy. If it sits still, it's +1, or going to get the +1 off the heavy effect. So it's still a good gun, but it got pricey. And I think that the Doomstalkers are getting that same increase because of it. It also might be the devastating wound factor. It might be another way to kind of reduce the strength of devastating wounds, since they have that, and by increasing those values on that tank, the Doomstalker doesn't immediately just overwhelm. I don't know. It's hard because, I mean, Doomstalker is good, but that 135, the 10 points on that one, I don't really feel why. I guess really the only justification I can come up with is just trying to reduce high damage weapons in the game. Like Games Workshop said, they're trying to reduce the damage effects. Because other things, like although Lichguard went up in points, a lot of the other things didn't. One of the changes that didn't happen, Lichguard, if you have a noble with them, they're -1 to wound. That's still a thing. So you put a lord with them, and you still have access to a Technomancer for Feel No Pain. And the Technomancer went through untouched. That one I'm super surprised at. I'm so surprised the Technomancer didn't go up in points, especially considering how strong it is. It was very, very surprising. Some other things. Crypt Thralls. This is a big one. This is going to really change a lot of lists. Crypt Thralls went up to 60 points per model. Or, I'm sorry, per unit. 30 points per model. It's to a point where people are going to start looking at Crypt Thralls and really, really weigh if they need them or not. 40 points wasn't that much, because 40 points, you're looking at 20 more points per model in the unit, especially with Lichguard. When you're buying 19-point models that are strong in combat and spending 20 points on 2 more models that have a good Feel No Pain, And they're cool. They're not that great in combat or anything like that, but they got a good feel no pain. They're durable. They're tough. That's what they're there for. Now it's 30 points per Lich Guard. And I feel like a lot of us at this point are now going to start to look at that and go, do I really, really want these Crypt Thralls? I still am going to take them in the Lich Guard because I feel like with the Lich Guard, 2 characters and 2 Crypt Thralls, taking that 14 model squad is better for its durability. So I think Crypt Thralls are still going to have a place there. I think that now, pre-devastating wounds, when playing against Eldar, I thought the Crypto Thrall was necessary with the warriors because when you have to take your armor save at first. You take your save or fail save because of AP and remove 1 warrior because you're never going to make the feel no pain on the Wraith Cannon on a single warrior. He takes 5 wounds. He's done. He's done. But at least you're soaking up all that damage on 1 dude. Then they do the devastating wounds. And because the devastating wounds would pour over, theoretically, the 2 Crypt Thralls could feel no pain and tank out that entire shot from the devastating wounds so it doesn't spill over into the warriors, and then you can trigger the warriors' good reanimation effects to bring back the Crypt Thralls. And at that point in time, I thought these guys were absolutely required. So now at 30 more points a model and the devastating wound change, I feel like now we're at a point that we don't need them with warriors at all. And that's going to be a big, big, big point saver on top of, once again, overlords over lords. Lords are 65 points apiece, so we can double up on lords for 130 points with resurrection orbs just to do that job. And I do like a res orb with some warriors. So Hexmark Destroyer, he went up 10 points. I get it. I can see why. Great Sovereign Cornell target. Everybody's running him. They don't want to change his stats. He's a very, very cool unit that runs very, very well. I don't want to see him change. Yeah, I'm fine with him going up a couple points to keep him around. Emotech dropped 5 points, which is weird. I think the Emotech is going to start to become more common because of increases to command point things. Since we can't zero things out on the overlords, you're going to want a little more CP. So I think Emotech is going to become more popular. While I don't think he's an auto include, I think he's definitely going to be more popular than he has been. Moving down, Locust Heavies. Locust Heavies went up 5 points per model, basically. So 50, 100 for 2, 150 for 3. Okay. They're good. 5 points more. I'm not surprised. Not surprised. They're powerful, powerful guns. And if you have the pieces and parts and tools to really amplify them, they're very solid units. So 10 more points on that. Still not bad. Doesn't make them unplayable. Locust Lore dropped by 5 points. Is it enough? I don't know. I think that 75 should be about the price range for him. Yes, he has Fly. Fly is garbage. He has a little bit of a better move. He can only attach to Locusts. And, he's very limited in what he can do. And he doesn't even have really a solid gun to attach to the Locusts in that sense. So I think the 80 points is still a little high, but we'll see. Some point reductions. Monolith drops from 385 to 350. Monolith has been a fringe unit. Many, many people I've talked to. So now with that 350 might be just enough to teeter him over to be able to be usable, especially with, again, some of the changes to other armies' point costs and other units. And this is one where the Wraith Knight change doesn't matter because the Wraith Cannon can still beat it up because that model is taking the wound. So Wraith Cannons are still effective versus the Monolith. But 350, it might be there now. Let's go. I'll jump a couple around here because go over to its big brother. The Tesseract Vault dropped from 425 to 375. And if you guys remember in my Catan video, the Tesseract Vault is nasty, 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 and probably one of the best indirect firing units in the game for its point cost. Like, now, okay, that's probably a stretch with that to say that Thousand Suns do exist, but it is mean. And now 375, 50-point drop. That's pretty big. Silent King down to 420 from 470. I think the Silent King is very good. I think he's very boring. And I think that's kind of one of the issues and why people don't play him as much is he's very, very boring, very linear. Hopefully when the Codex happens, gives him some more life, gives him some more love. Treyarch Praetorians drop from 135 to 120, so 15-point reduction there per unit, 240 for the 10-man. Still not overly impressed with them. It's not something we really utilize well. That's that infantry and that stuff, and because there's no character to join to them, makes them even less efficient. That's probably a place I would hope to see in Codex time. We get a little bit of love. Ophidians and Scorpex both drop 10 points per unit to 100 points for 3 and 200 points for the 6-man. And the Scorpec lore drops from 115 to 100. I think that is almost playable. 300 points for a Scorpec, a 6-man Scorpec with a Scorpec Lord seems almost playable. The issue I have with it right now is it doesn't have any way to invuln. So it's actually really fragile. Before we had the whirling strat for 1 command point to be -1 to wound. I think that we're nearly there though. It needs something else. Again, Codex time, we might get a Destroyer Cult detachment that might bring these guys home. I think their points for what they do, they're there. They're right there. They just need that little bit to push them over the edge. And, excuse me, went over the Warriors, went over the Praetorians. Oh, and the last heartbreaker, Transcendent Catan. While the Transcendent Catan did make it successfully through these data sheets and is still able to take enhancements, it was not, it grew some extra points on it. It went from 280 to 300 flat. So the Transcendent Catan jumped again, I believe again, and is significantly up there. So they didn't take the weave off, and instead they're just making it cost more for the model. So we're looking at 310. 310 for 4 up invuln, 4 up feel no pain. I'm definitely thinking that's still actually viable and really still strong, especially because the Catan does so much work in the secondary game that it's really still impressive. So I don't think that I think this will reduce how many T-Catans we see on the table because it is a significant chunk of points, but I won't say none. I still think there's going to be some lists that should still have that versatility and use it. And one thing about the Necron Codex is once you build your core, there is a lot of different units that you can look into, tag, and pick up and do the missions with from different angles. And that's one of the reasons I really do think the Warriors are going to be the winners right now in a Warrior Brick run and Illuminator Xeris, because it gives us really strong abilities all across the field for under 1,000 points. So, all right, guys, hopefully you enjoyed the video. That's it going over today with the data sheets. If I missed anything, please leave it down in the comment section so anyone watching this video and reading can pick up those hints. We're a community. We grow together. And I look forward to talking to you guys in this video and getting the rest of this set up. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.